Ajma'in. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first Sunan Ampel International Conference of Political and Social Sciences, SAICoPSS 2021, the second session or the second day today. It's a great honor for me, Lutfi from UINSA, to be your MC today. And before starting this event, we would like to thank the Rector of UIN Sunan Ampel Surabaya, Professor Masdar Hilmy, S.Ag, MA, Ph.D, who has already opened our event yesterday with his speech. We would also like to thank the Dean of the Faculty of Social and Political Science, State Islamic University of Sunan Ampel, Surabaya, Professor Ahmad Muzaki, M.Ag, Grade C, MPhil, Ph.D, who is already present with us today. The Vice Dean of Academic and Institutional Affairs, Dr. Abdul Halik, M.Ag, the Vice Dean of General Administration, Planning and Finance Affairs, Dr. Gadjah Wiwi Setiani, M.Ag, the Vice Dean of Cooperation and Student Affairs, Dr. Habib Mustafa, MSE, also the Dean of University Partners, Brawijaya University, Universitas Sriwijaya Madura, and also UNESA, Surabaya. The head of department and secretary, to all lecturers, managerial staff, and all participants and presenters, welcome to the second day of SAICoPSS 2021. We would like to welcome our invited speakers today, Dr. Salut Muhidin from Macquarie University, Australia, and also Mr. Dicky Sofjan, MPP, MA, Ph.D. from Gadjah Mada University, Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, let us convey our blessings and grace and be grateful towards Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, because due to His mercy and guidance, we are able to organize this event today on the 12th of August 2021. The first Sunan Ampel International Conference of Political and Social Sciences, SAICoPSS, with the theme Religion, Politics, and Welfare in the Global Pandemic Era. May greetings and salutations be upon Prophet Muhammad SAW, and may Allah guide us to follow his path and his way of life. Before opening this event, let us start by reciting Quran, Surah Al-Fatihah. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin, arrahmanir rahim, maliki yaumiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim, siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. And to start this event, let us express our love for our country, our homeland Indonesia, and our lovely campus, State Islamic University of Sunan Ampel, Surabaya, by singing our national anthem, Indonesia Raya, followed by the hymn song of UINSA. Ladies and gents, please sit up straight and follow and sing our national anthem.
Kepada Sang Merah Putih, hormat! Kang!
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at the main event of today's session, the second day of SAICoPSS 2021, which is the plenary session with our distinguished presenters, Dr. Salut Muhidin from Macquarie University, Australia, and also Mr. Dicky Sofjan, MPP, MA, Ph.D. from Gadjah Mada University, Yogyakarta, Indonesia. And this plenary session will be led by our moderator, Ms. Ajeng Widya, the lecturer of Department of Political Science, the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, UIN Sunan Ampel, Surabaya. To our moderator, the time and screen is yours.
Okay, everybody can hear me? Mas Lutfi?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the host for giving me the opportunity to be the moderator of this event. I also would like to thank to the leader of FISIP UIN Sunan Ampel Surabaya, the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences UIN Sunan Ampel Surabaya, Professor Ahmad Muzaki, M.Ag, Grad Tipsi, MPhil, Ph.D., the Vice Dean of Academic, Dr. Abdul Khalik, M.Ag., the Vice Dean of General Administration, Planning and Finance, Dr. Hajah Wiwi Spiani, M.Ag., the Vice Dean of Cooperation, Dr. Habib Mustafa, MSI, to all the committee of this conference and all of the participants that joined this session. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the plenary session of Day 2, SAICoPSS 2021. And let me say hello to our invited speaker. Assalamualaikum, Pak Salut.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Bandra.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to our second speaker. Assalamualaikum, Pak Dicky.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Pak Dicky? How's Yogyakarta?
I'm very good. Yogyakarta is not doing so well, but alhamdulillah, my family and I are well.
Alhamdulillah. The important right now is healthy, right? Okay. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I will inform you in our second plenary today in our Day 2. The participant allowed to give the question to our presenter directly. We have the feature for raise hand, so everybody here can ask directly to our presenter, something like that. And if some of you want to write the question on the chat box, it's okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, after this, I will read the curriculum vitae of our speaker. I will read first the curriculum vitae from Pak Salut. Okay. Our first invited speaker is a senior lecturer at Macquarie University, Sydney, Australia. He's also pursuing his bachelor degree in Faculty of Natural Science in IPB, majoring in Mathematica Economy. And then he's continued his master and doctoral special science in University of Groningen, Netherlands, applied demography, and his research experience in University Indonesia, current adjunct researcher at Lembaga Demografi Faculty of Economy and Business, and becoming the visiting professor at Magister Ekonomi Kependudukan dan Ketenagakerjaan (MAKK). And then he's continuing his research experience in University of Groningen, Netherlands, Ph.D. project for his Ph.D. project on Indonesia multi-regional demography. And then continuing his experience in Brown University, USA, the project of urban development in Ghana, Africa, and then continuing again in Université de Montréal, Canada, project of urban development in Burkina Faso, Africa, and then the latest is in the University of Queensland in Australia for his postdoctoral fellow. Well, it's such a great curriculum vitae. And then he's continuing, I'm continuing to read his curriculum vitae. He's also having the teaching experience in Macquarie University, subjects on management and applied demography at Macquarie Business School. Thank you, Pak Salut. And then, ladies and gentlemen, I also will read our second speaker for his curriculum vitae for us to know him better. His name is Dicky Sofjan, MPP, MA, PhD. Dr. Sofjan is an articulate and versatile intellectual, thinker, writer, and social activist in the fields of religion and politics, religious freedom and literacy, human dignity, minority studies, public diplomacy, and sustainability. He also has conducted research in these various fields and has been deeply engaged in many interreligious initiatives of the government of Indonesia, namely with the Ministry of Religion Affairs and Foreign Affairs. With his vast international network, Dr. Sofjan also worked and collaborate with the European Union, US State Department, Ford Foundation, Henry Luce Foundation, Global Ethics, Carnegie Council, Greenpeace, the Nature Conservancy, UNDP, and other international organizations and development agencies. He also appointed as a visiting fellow in Iran, Japan, Malaysia, Bulgaria, and Italy, and has spoken in over 80 international academic conferences and aired by international news outlets such as Forbes.com, Voice of America, The Economist, The Diplomat, Digital News Asia, Jakarta Post, Pakistan's International Herald, Corriere della Sera, La Repubblica, and others. Such a great curriculum vitae from our second speaker. I'm so honored to be the moderator of this session. Well, ladies and gentlemen, after this, we will listen to our first invited speaker. Without any further ado, I will invite our first speaker to talk more about his presentation. He will talking about the digital in the pandemic. Maybe Pak Salut, I will give you time around 30 minutes to present your presentation, and then we can have a discussion after that and something like that. So I will give you the time and the place to do the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Ajahn, for the kindly introduction. First of all, I would like to convey my appreciation and also thank you to the committee from the first International Conference on Political Science, particularly to our Dean, Professor Dicky, who's a best friend in the long from Queensland, as well as in also Nahdlatul Ulama. And I would like to acknowledge all the leaders and also the deans and also the vice dean that haven't been known yet, everyone, but I would like to say thank you very much for this opportunity and this invitation. So the theme of this the first conference is about the looking at the political and social science I was actually yesterday also coming to listen to Professor Aspinall. It was really inspiring, and also a lot of idea, and also from our colleague from China. So I may start from that one and then continue with my presentation today. So please allow me to share my screen. Okay, you can see it. So I've been given for 30 minutes, so I try to do my best to finish in 30 minutes. So I would like to see the influence of the pandemic and with our almost everyday one digital adoption in Indonesia. So I'm going to questioning ourselves whether are we ready to be a global digital society. The question is that what is the global digital society, and then what are digital adoption that have been done? Well, as you can see now, I mean, like I'm in Sydney, and then you are in Surabaya, and someone else maybe somewhere from around the world one. So basically, we've been connected by digital adoption, which is about using Zoom, right? So it's kind of like very our daily life today, and also timely, relevant. So that's why I would like to bring that dimension. Have you imagined that if this situation happening in the past? Yes, pandemic like this one, like Spanish influenza, we had that one in the past, but while back when everyone is not being connected. So the same kind of like the strategy, we have to wear masks, we have to kind of like doing cleaning our hand and so on and so on. And then also, as you can see here in the present time, there is always kind of like campaigns and also suggestion and advertisements. You can like, you have to wear a mask, you have to do kind of like distancing and so on. And also it's still kind of like, but what's something different between in the past and currently happen is basically in the past when everything's kind of like still very simple. And then today looks like the technology become kind of like very big one. So if we look at that, comparing with the past and the current one is basically we passed with the industrial revolution, and then which is kind of like we call it today is revolution number 4, which is kind of like starting from 2015 onward, or kind of like starting when the internet has been invented. So Spanish flu happened during the industrial revolution back in 18th centuries, where everybody just listened about there is a factory, there is invention about the car, there is kind of like invention about the new machine. So a lot of people like in European countries in the Western part, the household who used to kind of like washing manually, and they start to use the kind of like machine, right? While back in Asia, maybe in Indonesia, we haven't heard that one yet. So we still kind of like going to river, to sungai, and then washing by yourself, or kind of like everything by manually. But eventually, it's kind of like spread out everywhere, right? Digitalization going happen as well in 1950s to 1980s. So then starting, if you heard today is about big data issue, that's coming because of every day we kind of like producing we call it as structured and unstructured data. Structured data is basically we plan it. So what kind of data that we want to do it. But unstructured data is basically like what we talk about now is unstructured, because we don't plan it. We want to say something like this one. The question could be A, the question could be B, and suddenly become digitalized, right? So the big data is basically happening today. So this is kind of like affecting to the society and of course economic, to the society, including with their social as well as economic, like what our presenter, our plenary session yesterday about the political issues. I was really kind of like listening very carefully and also enjoying what the talk is about. So yes, it's happening. Not only pandemic also affecting the politics, but also digitalization affecting the politics, right? So that's kind of like something to do with this one. Okay. So what I'm going to talk today is basically looking at again COVID-19 as global pandemic. So I know that last few weeks we've been heard about that Indonesia hit very much about which pandemic one, but we have to know that this is not on Indonesia. It's happening everywhere, including in Sydney here. Even Sydney some people kind of like doing demonstration 2 weeks ago because of we've been locked down initially only for 2 weeks and then extended to 4 weeks. Everyone kind of like, no, we want to get out, we want to get out. So it's really hard for them. Imagine that Indonesia kind of like, oh, it's been there almost every day. Okay, so it is global pandemic. And then what happened after the pandemic happened in terms of digital adoption practice. And then I'm going to talk about it a bit global digital society, and then connect with that one in the context of Indonesia. Are we ready? So what kind of challenge and opportunity that we do have? So this is maybe kind of like a little bit repetition, but I would like to start with this one because why they call it COVID-19? Because initially, toward at the end of 2019, when everybody never heard about that one of the epidemiologists or some epidemiologists in China found out that there was a new virus that really seems like kind of like not fatal because it goes to the animal, but as everything else, like MERS, like SARS, MERS from like SARS as well as from the camel, MERS from camel one, and then it's kind of like spread out to the human being. So that starting point when human as a social human being, in particular like Asian people like Indonesia, we always want like ngumpul, orang ngumpul, but now it's kind of like we would like to kind of like always in a group thing. Okay, so that's why since early 2020 the COVID-19 has presented a public health crisis to around the world one, because the nature of that one is it is yes China, but you know that China in this particular day, I mean even until today, is the central of kind of like the economic booming everywhere. The early study, they found out that the starting point was kind of like because of there was a commercial connection between Wuhan in particular to around the world one. So it's about 388,287 passengers a flight from that 4 main cities, China, around the world one. It's just kind of like making spread out very fast one. So that's kind of like the starting point of why virus happening, because we didn't know and we didn't expect that happen so fast one. So as a result, today COVID-19 became a global pandemic, in particular in America. If we look at the data in America, even worse. Okay, Indonesia is kind of like maybe small one, but America as number is a really big one itself. So, but the difference between one to the other is because of in terms of the how do they react and how do they prevent it one. America did suddenly, because of the sources of the Pfizer, a lot of people get vaccination soon after that one. And Europe the same thing, the sources of the AstraZeneca and sources a lot of things, so they do some other thing. But also in Australia we do have AstraZeneca branches here, but also we got kind of like Pfizer imported from US as well. So the nature, the way that we react and the way that we how to solve this one is it's something different. But in general, it's kind of like dynamic everywhere. Look at that United States of America. A while back, like 3 months ago, it's kind of like in the peak season one, and then now a little bit down and up down. India, if you heard about Indian case, like 2 months or 3 months ago, it's kind of like everyone's screaming about the oxygen as well. And Iran is also the same thing. Nowadays, it's become kind of like very, very severe. Everyone's also screaming about that one. Indonesia, this is just based on what they report to WHO. So I didn't say that it's happening exactly, but this is reported from Indonesian government to WHO. So yes, last in June is a really high peak in Indonesian case. And then lucky enough, looks like the curve getting slowed down, and hopefully it goes back again to normal or a little bit going down. So that's the expectation from everyone, including myself, of course. So what happened is basically the way that we're dealing with the pandemic, and then how do we control our mobility, because the pandemic itself kind of like spread out by the triangle. So the disease itself, the virus itself, and then the medium is the people to mobile. So that's why the first thing that we need to control is about our mobility. But the question is that, how do we control the mobility? A lot of people thinking like this is like a typical trolley problem. So shall we open the human mobility track? But then the health going to happen, right? If we didn't put the track one, maybe other things that going to hit by that thing. Okay, so maybe the invention is about making a new track. So avoiding about the health issue, avoiding about the everything else, right? So there is a lot of question how to do that one, which is about like typical trolley problem, that we have to invent a new railway in order to avoid the situation. But making a new one, it could be very expensive one. Yeah, like in Australian case, for example, yes, we apply for so-called social security, where people who lost the job or who lost the wage because of the COVID-19, the government tried to compensate by giving like very basic amount. I read in the tick.com or somewhere, they said Sydney people got 8 million rupiah. So like, yeah, in terms of million sounds like big one, but when you calculate in terms of living costs in Sydney, that could be kind of like very basic thing, like you just kind of like go shopping and then paying the renting and so on, which is everyone is trade-off in that one. So as a result, from the pandemic, is remote working and digital activity are among significant impact. As I said, we have Zoom, we have Microsoft Teams, we have Google thing, and a lot of things. Like here in United States, based on the report of McKinsey and Company, they said working from home is kind of like the biggest share in everywhere. In particular, those who are working in IT industry, professional business service, financial activities, manufacturing, but education is also kind of like get hit with that one. Different from one to the others. Sometimes people really want to do directly to the online or digitalization, but adaptation in that one is a little bit take a while. So as a result, another one is not only in terms of working home, but also in terms of the e-commerce and online buying. Okay, so a lot of the acceleration in terms of adoption of digital channel as the recession coming in. So the question is that what happened in Indonesia? I haven't done any study directly, and lucky enough that thanks to BPS, they have done the social demography survey to the impact of COVID-19. I just highlight what some of the outcomes they found. Okay. The same story what we found in global. So the first of all, remote is become less, so they become like penggunaan transportasi mulai dihindari. About 82% reduce their mobility, and then a lot of people working from home, bekerja dari rumah. In particular, they call it SWFH. Some kind of like still 7% working as usual, but then it's mostly about 40% always working from home since it was being applied. Another one that also can be seen here is buying online, belanja online. Yeah, that's become it's very big one. 9 out of 10 respondents from the survey they have conducted saying that they do it online nowadays. Including I think so that's why no wonder like a big company, online company like Tokopedia and then Shopee, they try to kind of like lure you with a lot of kind of like discount, is in particular shopping day in like a Wednesday or Thursday, some other day. So this is kind of like become their business model to try to attract more people one. So it's about like increase 42% before COVID and then after COVID one. So in a short, pandemic and digital adoption is very kind of like link each other. I just highlight two things here, the education and economic. Of course, many other things. So according to the World Bank, in Indonesian case, for example, about 68 million children have to do distance learning since it was applied. Okay, so from the beginning, like last year and then until today, so it's about this is report last year, sorry, about 68 million has been affected because of that one. The economic business, the same thing. Even my mother-in-law, when I asked about what are you doing about the shopping, because she's getting older, so she just said like, oh, I just called tukang sayur, and then tukang sayur already has like a list. What do you want to buy? And then so they just list, and then they just put in front of your home. So which is kind of like amazing. In the past, from the social point of view, this is it's really interesting one, because like we lost about the that we used to be, say like in this, I don't know what they call it, sinetron type thing, the typical whenever the tukang sayur just pass by, they always kind of like all the women coming gathering and then gossiping as well, right? But these days with this one, I don't think you have that chance anymore to do that one, unless you have a group, WhatsApp group of this particular tukang sayur or mas ganteng or whatever it is, then yes, you may have that one. My point here is basically, again, digital adoption has become like almost, you cannot avoid that one because of that's the limitation of the mobility. Okay, so in terms of education, according to the prediction from the World Bank, if it is going to happen all the time, so the PISA, the estimation of the, what do you call it, some of the subject like mathematics and other type thing, for Indonesia, it may kind of like reduce declining in particular about reading, membaca. Yeah? So already in 2018, the rank is 371. And then so after post-COVID-19, there is prediction that the score, PISA score for Indonesia in terms of reading, it could be reduced accordingly. Because, yeah, I also still talk with my family and also my niece and nephew, those who have the little kid like a kindergarten, how do you try to teach them? Because everyone's become a teacher at home, right? So of course, the quality is completely different between the teacher as being qualified. You have kind of like been trained to kind of like teaching everyone how to read properly, how to do it well. If you have the parent who's kind of like in the, even in the academic, working as a docent or working as a lecturer, may not necessarily knows how to start to read for the little kid, yeah, because it could be completely different. So that's why does it make sense when the estimation could be kind of like declining because of that prediction one. But anyway, so again, I would like to recall about this global digitalization. So we live in these particular days about digital become our everyday life, and we can't avoid to have that digital in ourselves. Even ourselves, like being surrounded by mobile phone and also kind of like computer every time, that's become our everyday one. So what happened when COVID-19 hit this globally? So according to the studies just last year by Andep and Ampel, they predict that the situation of digitalization actually already starting to decline a little bit. So people kind of like, yes, when digital era was there, people seem like having the new toys, right? Like the new toys, everyone was so excited. That's kind of like every business, every all kind of like using that. Even kind of like Coursera course is there, but not many people kind of like want to see that one. And then the COVID-19 hit. So that's kind of like when the little bit digital is kind of like little bit declining. And suddenly, because of that one, nowadays is the digitalization become like yet even further, I think, push to go beyond one, because global village re-emerge, connectivity built become kind of like a re-emerge, and then global digital transformation even kind of like faster than before. So that's kind of like the prediction what happened done. How it's happening according to data? Yes, look at data here by January 2021, according to the HOOTS survey, about 202 million active internet users in Indonesia, about 74% of total population in 2021. And then surprisingly, the increase from 2000 to 2019 before the pandemic, and then during pandemic about 2020, and then 2021, the increasing is so fast. You can see that one, yeah? Between 56% become 57%. It's kind of like a little bit faster than before one. And according to the BPS, it's also more and more people doesn't have the telephone by the wire. So a lot of people just using the wireless one. Okay, so for example, the red one here is penduduk mengakses internet. Okay, and then the yellow or the brown here is basically rumah tangga mengakses internet. Okay, so a lot of people kind of like increasing very fast, even that before the COVID-19. Just looking at the comparison between 2015 and 2019. So before, the lowest one is Papua with only 9%. And then by 2019, Papua is already about 22%. So you can see that it's increasing everywhere. In Jakarta already a lot of. So that's kind of like the situation basically globally. Again, just kind of like to give you an idea, the mobile internet use become more common, daily time span is also quite high, about almost 8 hours per day on average, which is kind of like almost like from 9 to 5. And then daily time span with media is also increasing in Indonesia and around the world one. Okay, so goes to the adaptation to digitalization, and then now I would like to bring it the idea, what about the global digital society? Okay, so global digital society is also kind of like coming from the globalization. Globalization meaning here I define as the process of international integration arising from interchange of worldviews, not only ideas, worldviews, but also products, ideas, and other aspects of culture every day. It could be including economics, social, and politics. The keyword is basically there is cross-international border changing. Yeah? So whether the question is that whether our behavior in terms of digital adaptation exactly the same with everyone else. Let's see. In terms of digital around the world, we can like almost similar, about 56%, 55% one. And then the internet user is almost like in Indonesia, Southeast Asia, about 70%. And the highest one is in Western countries like Northern Europe, Western Europe, Northern America, and almost everywhere. Some part of Africa, of course, still kind of like in the small percentage one. Social media has become like one of the phenomenon as well. If you're kind of like interested, want to do study about social media, I think this is the time, the relevant time to see whether social media has an impact to the way that we're thinking, the way that we spread the word, the way that also like we are communicating. Yeah, because I just look at the top messenger application, for example, the green one is WhatsApp. Almost everyone in Indonesia has WhatsApp. If you have two mobile, you may have WhatsApp as well. But in China, they try to kind of like putting their own. This is kind of about like also protection about the information because of the global idea as well. So China has only about like WeChat. So you can see there is no other red color around the world except China using WeChat. On the other hand, Facebook Messenger is more kind of like become US. So if you want to kind of like controversial between the US and China in terms of the application of digitalization is also already can see here. The rest of the world just using WhatsApp that kind of like a lot of people having. Okay. So impact of internet and social media, of course, there is positive impact, but also at the same time, there is a negative impact. Positively, it creates more awareness. It could be for us in terms of education, lecture sharing, like what we are doing today, or reduce the cost of purchasing learning materials, like my colleague who's working in the supply chains. They said, well, we don't have to kind of like shipping all the time. Sometimes like the book, they can just print it on the corner, on the spot one. Or even like with the 3D printing, sometimes they just kind of like send the design and then the printer go do that one, everything, okay? So it's kind of like helping you to overcome some difficulties in terms of logistic, improve social. But like the, what do you call it, as a knife, it's always two sides, the sharp side and also the blind side, the bounce, what do you call it, not really both sides one. So negative impact is of course like increasing cyberbullying, like there is always kind of like hoax issues that is hard for kind of like just regular or ordinary people like myself who doesn't know about whether this is hoax or not. It's really that one. And of course, like if you're not sharing that information and then suddenly just forward that one, it's become like more kind of like the spread out everywhere, right? So the same thing with the health hazard, a lot of kind of like health hazard, red eyes or become like more using the glasses and so on. It's kind of like a lot of the impact, of course, in this. I just want to give you some idea if you are interested doing that one. There are a lot of theory that you can use, like personal behavior theories, some also social behavior theories, about social aspect theories, and also mass communication. We call it as parasocial interaction, user identification theory. So my point here is basically the positive side. We can see the from the social point of view is basically we can see whether there is an impact about the adoption technology or digital technology in our society with their behavior as well. So that's kind of like just give you one. Okay. So about the global digital society is basically you being connected with digital as a global society one. Okay, so because of the globalization, the terminology I brought before about the keyword is about across the border, which is kind of like become easy if there is no digital. If the pandemic happened like even 10 or 20 years ago, maybe we have to wait the letters, not WhatsApp, like using Telegram, using listening to radio about the news, and then go to whatever it is. It's really hard to kind of like follow up to date everyday one. So in short, we are a global community or a global society of billion, and everyone has a part to play. One thing that become the global society, digital society, is you have to kind of like empower our citizen with digital citizenship guide. This is kind of like the example what Australian government trying to share and also to educate the people become digital citizenship guide. So talking about literacy in terms of digital commerce, a lot of vulnerability among customer when they can like do that. In particular, the senior citizen, the elderly, they become a scam. They've got email saying, "Oh, you got lottery," and then suddenly they just happy and then they just click that one. It become like digital commerce, digital ethic as well, how to behave. because these days a lot of human resource company, they hire people through the LinkedIn, for example, through just email. There is no kind of like face-to-face interview anymore, just kind of like give you CV in terms of videos. Okay, so you have to be using the digital ethic, but also like in United States, America, Facebook, your any social media become also one of part of the consideration to approve your visa, for example. If you apply in the last 2 or 3 years to go to US, they always asking if you have social media like Facebook and so on. That's the way that they do kind of like screening these days, because when they found out that you're against them, it's kind of like, why should I accept someone who's kind of against myself, right? So that's kind of like, be careful in terms of, that's what they call it, digital ethic, digital literacy, digital responsibility, digital privacy, digital security. Even for my school children at school, they've been kind of like taught about how to keep your privacy, which one can be open, which one you have to keep by yourself, and also about not kind of like, again, cyberbullying is always there. You cannot protect, just like open the window, all wind can come in. So the only thing is that you need to protect whether the strong wind or this kind of like very nice wind that you would like to accept. So that's kind of like that's one. Yeah. The problem is that we do still have so-called digital and social exclusion, okay? In particular about the economics, in terms of affordability, in terms of technical, which is about infrastructure and awareness, okay? So just want to head up to Indonesia. But one thing that the issue that we would like to mention here is about digital divide. So it's always there is a digital divide. So there is people who's kind of like missing out because of this one, and people who's kind of like get been reached out. Like Professor Aspinall yesterday mentioned about everything surveyed this day by digital. And one thing is kind of like a little bit unbiased here is basically the reaching out is mostly in terms of urban area, which is true. Like digital division is also happening in terms of a lot of in the high income countries with very high one. The internet penetration is quite high one. And look at that, the lower human development index, like in Solomon Island, Kenya, Pakistan, is kind of like a very, very low one. So the question is that, are we ready to be a digital society? So I just want to close up this one. So I'm using the so-called MD Working Digital Competitiveness Ranking. They use looking at 3 variables: knowledge, technology, and future readiness, so preparation. So in terms of knowledge, there is talent. In terms of technology, there is a technology framework. In terms of future readiness, they have adaptive for readiness one. So this particular what do you call it? NGOs, they conducted in 63 countries around the world, including in all the countries. And Indonesia, so far, in 2020, ranked in the 56. So which one is not really doing well? Okay, so Indonesia doing very good in terms of future readiness. A lot of people kind of like adopting, but not really in terms of knowledge and in terms of technology. So that's why kind of like the position in terms of 56, because of the composite of those 3 things. Yeah, because of the readiness is okay, but not necessarily in terms of knowledge and so on. So you can have a look much better detail which part that in terms of knowledge is not really doing very well. In terms of training and education, that's kind of like really still not doing well. So what about digital competition in Indonesia at regional level? As you can see that another NGO at the Indonesian level, they're also doing exactly the same competitiveness index for digital in Indonesia. And based on 4 elements in terms of input, output, and support. It's kind of like a little bit similar in terms of human resource, in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the supporting. Yeah? So again, not every region is ready to have kind of like digital competitiveness index or kind of like very high one. Jakarta with the infrastructure is very one. And East Java, where Surabaya is there, is already 50% in the competitiveness index one. So my answer to the first question is about, are we ready to be a global digital society? I will say not yet. There are still some significant aspects need to be prepared. It includes human capital, the knowledge, and infrastructure. I think I stop with that one. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Pak Salut, for the presentation. That's great information that we can get. I think from your presentation, it's really relate with the condition right now in Indonesia, that most of the society are struggling because of the pandemic, and all of the activities right now are changed to be very digital. But I think not everyone here are really ready to be digital on something like that. Maybe Pak Salut, I will have so many questions for you later in our discussion. But right now, everybody, are you still with me, the participant? Because after this, I will invite our second speaker, Pak Dicky Sofjan, to tell us more about the religion, politics, and also the pandemic. I think it's such a great topic for us to discuss. Okay, without any further ado, I will invite our second speaker, Pak Dicky Sofjan. The time is yours.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you very clearly.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli, amma ba'd. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to share with you my thoughts on some of the things I've been thinking about and some of the things that I've been doing research on. My name is Dicky Sofjan. I'm from the Indonesian Consortium for Religious Studies based in the Graduate School of Universitas Gadjah Mada in Yogyakarta. It's a consortium of 3 universities, essentially Gadjah Mada University, which is a non-confessional university, the Islamic University of Sunan Kalijogo, and the Christian University of Duta Wacana. So I'm based there in the Gadjah Mada University, but I also teach at the Graduate School of the Islamic University in Sunan Kalijogo, teaching Middle Eastern studies and Islamic thought in Muslim societies. So what I'd like to share with you is my thoughts on religion, social capital amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I'd just like to start off with a little bit of context. The picture on the left is my book, my edited volume, which I did with Dr. Muhammad Wildan from the Islamic University on virus, humans, and God, essentially trying to compile some of the insights and experiences and the reflections coming from the different faith communities around Indonesia with respect to how religious communities and people of faith respond to the public health emergency. One of the things that we argued was, this pandemic really had opened up an old wound, so to speak, this sort of perpetual battle between religion and science. Yeah? So hence you find a number of people still sort of in a state of denial and not being able to fully comprehend and fully realize the extent of and the dangers of this novel coronavirus.
Is it still working?
Yeah, I think we lost the contact with Dicky. Wait a moment. Kayaknya ada trouble dengan sinyalnya Pak Dicky. Kita menunggu sebentar ya.
Yes.
While we wait, I can have the question if you want.
Okay. Okay, while we are waiting for Pak Dicky, Pak Salut, maybe I have several questions to talk about your presentation because of my thesis is also talking about the digitalization, but in urban Muslim society in Surabaya. So yeah, because it's really interesting to talk about the digital society. I think it's really interesting if we want to know more about the community right now that face the condition. It's not only the millennials that face the pandemic, but also the baby boomer community. So what do you think baby boomer can adaptation with the condition right now? Because I think like not every region in Indonesia ready to face the digitalization, especially in education field, something like that. Because I have my mother-in-law, she's a teacher in Central Java, which is the activity of the education is not totally from the internet. Like they have to wait for the teacher to the student have to wait the teacher to come to their house to do the study together, something like that, because not everyone of the student have the handphone, something like that. So even for having the laptop, they don't have. They only have the phone, and the phone is also having from their parents. So it's so difficult for the student there to be developed because of the pandemic, something like this. So the teacher in that situation are trying to make the strategy to how to the education still working. They are willing to go to every student house to do the study, something like that. So what do you think about that?
Thank you, Ajeng. Yes, I just want to share my experience here in Australia, and also about my experience when I conduct field work in terms of health workers based in Nusa Tenggara Timur in NTT. Maybe the first one is in NTT. That's not even COVID-19 yet. But my point is technology is something that, yes, people, you need to what do you call it? You have to invest something, right? Like the health workers back in Nusa Tenggara Timur, not in the city, that's fine, like Kupang city. But while back in the remote area, like in the mountainous area, or the nurse told me that they have to kind of like climb to the tree in order to get signal, to get Wi-Fi, because there is a program so-called Lapor Diri for those pregnant women in order to be able to be safe into the hospital or to the nearest puskesmas, right? So in order to do that one is every health workers has to kind of like contact the hospital and so on. What happened? The contraction happening, and then they couldn't have the Wi-Fi. They have to climb up the tree, and it's kind of like, oh, this is really hard for them as well. So the solution that last time was kind of like, of course, trying to regularly monitor. Yeah, that's the first thing. The second one is they do have so-called emergency way how to contact either someone sending the like object directly or whatever it is in order everyone knows. So that's kind of like my point is we do need kind of like strategy into do that one. Okay, in talking about strategy, what happened in Australian context, yes, we call it as developed countries, but in terms of adopting technology right away, we also have kind of like little bit so-called gagap technology, right? Like I used to teach like face-to-face, and suddenly some of my colleagues know how to do online. So suddenly within 2 weeks, we have to switch from face-to-face to go to online. So someone's still kind of like learning how to do Zoom, how to do breakout room, how to do everything. So you can imagine, like even we have to kind of like switch in 2 weeks with kind of like, the point is you need some time, okay? Whether 2 weeks or 2 months, that you need to be being kind of like training how to do that one. Left alone about some school, like my kid who's in the high school now, year 7, last year, the school sent email to all parents say that if you at home you don't have any computer, we are going to lend you. So there is a willingness from the school to solve that problem in the first place, because they know that not everyone may able to buy computer, everyone, okay? Or like for the primary school, like kindergarten, what happened is all the material being dropped, being collected. So parent has to collect the material from school rather than sending that, because some of material cannot be sent by online. So the children just want to see the material, like the toys or the shape, everything. So my point here is basically, how do we prepare that one in order to be ready? That's kind of like the keyword. It's not right away, okay, PPKM, done. You have to do it as whatever it is. Oh my goodness, people will get screaming. That's the thing. The same thing like economic, as I said, there is some package about how to solve that issue. Because of that one, you missing customer. So we give, like for business, in order to people going back to the business, like community get voucher, like $25, you can buy coffee everywhere. So instead of giving, go directly to business, give to the people spending, right? You don't want to just drinking coffee. Of course, you want to buy something else. So it means like, I give you $10, you spend more $15. So it's in order kind of like stimulus package thing. Maybe that's my answer.
Okay, thank you, Pak Salut, for the answer. Ladies and gentlemen, we will back with our second speaker, Pak Dicky Sofjan. Is everything okay?
Yes, I'm sorry about this. It doesn't usually happen this way. I guess I need to climb up a tree one of these days, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, Pak Sofjan.
Thank you very much, Pak Salut, you know, for filling in. Yeah.
Okay. If everything is ready, you can continue your presentation.
I certainly hope so. So I'll just be fairly quick about this. Yeah, but basically, as I was saying, that there seems to be this opening up of an old wound between religion and science, and hence you find this sort of disparity in the way people look at the novel coronavirus and how to respond to the pandemic and the masking and the social distancing and travel restrictions and so on and so forth. But I'm also sort of basing my paper on the knowledge that we are very much within this context of what's called conservatism. Yeah, and with conservatism, we have seen a lot of populist movements around the world, which have caused social polarization in society. So one of the important lessons during this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic is essentially to not rely on the government. We have seen in the past 1.5 years at least how states and governments everywhere around the world have been constricted in terms of their budget, in terms of their resources, health facilities, and political will and expedience in terms of trying to overcome this pandemic. And at this juncture, there have been over, 200 million people who have been infected by the virus across, 223 countries. And we've seen at least 4.3 million who have been infected, and have died of the virus. So in other words, there is a limit to state capacity in terms of confronting the spread of the novel coronavirus. And such a critique no doubt undermines the realist perspective and has emerged as one of the sort of failings of the so-called modern nation states. So as much as the human history has seen pandemics recurring, but certainly we are seeing that states and governments everywhere are totally unprepared. So it is worth noting the fact that some of the worst hit countries are democratic ones, India, the United States of America, and Indonesia, as opposed to the more non-democratic or even communist controlled states, like even China, where the first outbreak occurred. We are seeing a very fast and expedient and efficient way of overcoming the pandemic. And you look at Vietnam and Lao PDR, for instance, and the way they have successfully managed and controlled the spread of the virus. So the argument therefore goes that the COVID-19 pandemic seems to be much better managed and controlled by non-democratic and communist states that relies on authoritarianism and heavy-handed policies on, as mentioned, masking, testing, tracing, social distancing, travel restrictions, vaccinations, and so on. And so this has given rise to the logic that regime type matters. That liberal and progressive states with their parliamentary deliberations, decentralized decision-making, and market efficiency has or did not fare well when it comes to mitigating the multifaceted problems caused by the current pandemic. So an assertion could, of course, be quantitatively evidenced by the alarming rate of deaths per population due to the COVID-19 and the overcapacity of hospital beds, emergency rooms across these countries. However, I believe that the above logic and argument merely covers half of the story. So while it may be true that regime type matters and that many democratic governments are restricted in their policy options and actions that hinder their ability to swiftly and systematically mitigate the problems associated with the pandemic, that one factor seems to be ignored or left out in the equation, and that is social capital. So this paper of mine attempts to explain how social capital plays a role in determining the mitigation measures against the COVID-19 pandemic, and how religion basically plays a role in contributing to the increased solidarity among the people of faith and outside of faith. And so given the strict social restrictions still being imposed by the government, the study only implies a limited set of data gathering techniques, as in, media reports, citizen journalism, and of course, direct observation, participation, and communication among the community leaders and members of the faith communities. So if we look at the sociology of religion, essentially it revolves around the idea that religion plays a part in making societies, in the making of societies, and how members from different groups with racial, ethnic, and religious affiliations interact with one another. The problem is that the study of religion has been largely informed by Western notions of the so-called world religions, derived mostly from the study of Christianity, Judaism, and certainly have Western interest and biases. And so this requires a study of religion in societies to take a more sort of ethnographic and qualitative and even participatory turn to herald a more rigorous, sympathetic, and hopefully objective way of examining the subject matter. So in addition to the Christian and Western biases, the study of religion in society has also long suffered from extreme duality that essentializes religion. Yeah. So as Michelle Dillon notes in her handbook on the sociology of religion, for instance, that from an intellectual perspective, it largely reflects both the overemphasis on reason and the tendency to relegate religion to the realm of the non-rational that are characteristic of modern social thought. So you see a sort of two extreme ways of looking at religion. And starkly phrased, the former places a calculating instrumental rationality as the overarching determinant of all forms of social action, while the latter sees religion and reason as inherently incompatible. The field of sociology of religion also delves into the way religion affects development and the trajectory of societies and how they respond to the various challenges, both from within and without. So in that sense, religion is perceived as a strong foundation for the existing cultural systems and practices. As such, religion serves as a basis for what Durkheim's idea of mechanical solidarity is based largely on the common values and beliefs that make members of society to cooperate among each other. Roedicock also argues that one of the most time-honored assertions about the nature of religion is that it is the major integrator of human society. It is thus pertinent to re-examine the correlation between religion, which is defined operationally here to mean religious people, leaders, faith-based organizations, its teachings, its social practices and charitable activities, and social capital within the context of the ongoing global public health crisis. As you can see, theoretically, social capital relates to what's called social networks or bonds of trust and social interconnectedness, while Pierre Bourdieu looks at social capital as the immaterial form of cultural capital. Yeah, it also looks at it as a durable network of more or less institutionalized relationships of mutual acquaintance and recognition. Putnam, in his book on making democracy work in Italy and also Bowling Alone, emphasizes on this idea about civic culture, civic values. And he believes that social capital's essential ingredient is reciprocity and trustworthiness. Yeah. Meanwhile, Nan Lin looks at social capital as the elements of resources embedded in social structures and networks rather than in individuals. Lin also argues that social capital is like investment in social relations with expected returns in the marketplace. And so social capital is very much under the sort of rational choice theory. And so many of the logic and operational definitions of social capital is very much influenced by rational behavior. These two pictures were the posters put up, the banners put up in my village, where there were strict restrictions for people outside of the village to come into the village. And I think during the first year of the pandemic, we saw a lot of these banners being put up in the entrances of our villages, notably in Java, yeah, and I'm guessing in other parts of the world. And this picture is a picture of a food bank, which was erected right after the emergence of the pandemic, allowing the less fortunate members of the village could just take the food away and make food out of it. Yeah. So there's vegetables, there's fruits, and many other things being offered here. Now, if you look at the religious responses of the pandemic, it's really interesting how religious communities or people of faith respond to the crisis. And of course, during the initial period of the pandemic, everyone was very confused and distraught. We were obviously saddened by pictures and depictions in media where people were dropping dead on the streets and people were brought to ad hoc graveyards, that were, ad hocly built by the government or local governments to bury the dead, and also looking at the various pictures and videos and citizen journalism footages of tiresome medical professionals working around the clock. And so this reminds me of Zizek's description about what he put in his book, which came out 2020 on the pandemic, where he said that the viral pandemics remind us of the ultimate contingency and meaninglessness of our lives. And so no matter how magnificent the spiritual edifices we, humanity, construct, a stupid natural contingency like a virus or an asteroid can end it all. Not to mention the lesson of ecology, which is that we, humanity, can only unknowingly contribute to this end. Yeah. So during the early days of the global pandemic, in the first quarter of 2020, people and governments were still unconvinced of the veracity of the novel coronavirus, which started in Wuhan, China. I mean, I remember during the mid-February, I was still in Abu Dhabi for 10 days attending the World Urban Forum, where there were, I'm guessing, 18,000 attendants to that conference, to that event in one convention center in Abu Dhabi. And just a month after that, on the 11th of March, we had the coming of the Netherlands King and Queen to Indonesia. And I was tasked to host an event at Candi Prambanan, where we gathered religious leaders from around the vicinity to discuss about interfaith issues and all. And so we were still very much unconvinced of the veracity of the novel coronavirus and how that would affect, the immediate lives that we were managing on a day-to-day basis. And so the situation was eerily, almost similar to the same kind of, sense of disbelief and denial among the Christian conservative congregations, as depicted in Albert Camus's The Plague, wherein he wrote, the plague was for them unwelcome visitant, bound to take its leave one day as unexpectedly as it had come. So alarmed, but far from desperate, they hadn't yet reached the phase when plague would seem to them the very tissue of their existence, when they forgot the lives that until now it had been given them to lead. In short, they were waiting for the turn of events. So with the current pandemic, social bonding and sense of interconnectedness have diminished due largely to the social distancing and travel restrictions imposed by governments worldwide, with some intermittent relaxation periods for the countries that are considered to be doing quite well in managing the spread of the virus. But amid the various restrictive policy of the state, some were arguing that masks have tremendously weakened our human ability to communicate as normally as human beings, as people are unable to see each other's facial expressions in full perspective. So as we communicate with people in a distance of 1 or 2 meters away, one cannot be sure of whether his or her counterpart is frowning or smiling. So in such circumstances, it would not be an exaggeration to state that the social bonds, networks, and trusts that have been built all along throughout the long years of interaction and friendships and acquaintances during the pre-pandemic era are crumbling down. So this may perhaps be the reason why there is so much restlessness, helplessness, and hopelessness in the ongoing pandemic, as some people are agonizing the loss of their social capital. So subsequently, people are turning to religion for help, or at least for some comfort and solace. And so just looking at the numerous responses to the pandemic, I find that the most interesting ones are the responses from the religious actors. And during the early period of the pandemic, religious people, groups, and organizations around the world seem to have more or less similar queries about the rampaging, caused by the COVID-19. And some of these questions included, what is the meaning behind this pandemic? And why are so many people dying, for instance? Will our faith be strong enough to withstand the test of the new coronavirus? Do our prayers, supplications, and rituals suffice to prevent us from being infected? I took note of the fact that the religious community in the Nahdlatul Ulama, for instance, spread the news that they should be engaging in an act of intercession using the practice of incantation, using the Li Khamsatun incantation to build better protection for themselves and for their family members and friends around them. And it begins like this, Li Khamsatun utfi biha harral waba'il hatima al-Mustafa wal Murtada wabnahuma wa Fatima. So using the names of the Ahlul Kisa, or people of the house, the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet, to sort of add to the fortress of faith, if you like, to defend themselves from the dangers of the virus. And so you've seen a lot of these different modifications and innovations, religious innovations and spiritual practices that were not seen or used before during the pre-pandemic era. And then the other question was, how should religious leaders, groups, and organizations respond to this public health crisis? So there were also confusion among the religious leaders on how the community should respond. And then, of course, the ultimate question is, why is God doing this to us? Where is his divine love and mercy? If he is truly Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, the beneficent and the merciful, why is he allowing this tragedy to unfold? And why are people dying on a daily basis and people, are losing their loved ones? And it seemed like God does not seem to be quite responsive in this time of pandemic to stop the tragedy from unfolding. And then the next question is, what have the people of faith done to deserve his wrath? If God is angry at us, then why is God angry also at the Muslims or those who have submitted their lives and who have engaged in worship to him? So why does it also include the Muslims and not just the kafirs, for instance? And so these are just some of the questions and queries that the people of faith try to come to terms with. But clearly that we are seeing an effort from the various religious communities around the world to be able to really ask the question of how they can recontextualize their religious teachings and practices during this time of pandemic. And obviously, also being applied later on once the new normal has arrived. We have also seen a different kind and a unique turn by the Majlis Ulama. Yeah? So amid the perplexing situation, a new trend among the people of faith has also emerged. And we've seen that the Majlis Ulama Indonesia, or the Indonesian Council of Ulamas, which has long been seen as a bastion of Muslim conservatism, displayed a rather constructive role in issuing many fatwas, yeah, religious legal opinions or decrees that support the government of Indonesia's stance on combating the COVID-19 pandemic. The Majlis Ulama, for instance, has issued fatwas on the conduct of daily and Friday congregational prayers in the mosques, and saying that, and advising Muslims essentially to not engage in prayers and supplications in the houses of worship, and also to prevent mass gatherings, that mass rituals and festivities that we normally hold in congregation was also advised not to be held. And I think for the past 2 years now, many of us have celebrated Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha at home with our family members and close friends only. And also during Ramadan, yeah, we've seen that there have been people who are adhering to the idea that we should not be holding iftars or breaking of the fast during the holy month of Ramadan. And then there were also fatwas pertaining to vaccinations. There were at least 2 fatwas. One is to allow Muslims to take the vaccinations, because vaccinations are considered halal and suci, so permissible and pure. But also the second fatwa also advise Muslims to not have to worry about being vaccinated during the month of Ramadan, or when one is holding his or her fast, because that would not violate the principles of fasting. So if you look at these fatwas and legal opinions coming from the religious authorities, these are certainly not your conventional fatwas, you know, and so we are seeing a sort of a blessing in disguise in the way that we are seeing a significant shift in the way the religious authorities are gravitating from the usual sort of conservative stance to a much more progressive stance amid the COVID-19 pandemic. So I guess this also calls for much more research on the sort of textual interpretation and contextual interpretations of these MUI fatwas. I myself am doing a paper on this, which I hope to finish off someday. So just looking at religion and social capital. So again, if we look at social capital as, you know, a resource, yeah, where there is this flourishing of cultural capital in society, that people can experience upward mobility through their social networks or social religious networks. We can also see that the same kind of things apply here during the time of the pandemic. I mean, just an example, in my case, because I'm a lecturer in the Gadjah Mada University, you know, I had the privilege of being vaccinated early on in April 2021. And so I was, you know, among the earliest ones in Yogyakarta to be vaccinated. But that cannot happen if I were not related to UGM, or if I did not work in UGM or had you know, a social and professional working ties with the university. But I'm also seeing that there's a lot of roles being played by the different religious organizations, namely the biggest ones in this case, the Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah. Just recently, my friend Professor Abdul Muti has announced how the Muhammadiyah has contributed at least 1 trillion rupees to the efforts against the COVID-19 pandemic. But also we have seen that the Nahdlatul Ulama, through their networks of pesantrens, have provided mass vaccinations for people of different faiths. 2 of my 4 children were vaccinated in one of the pesantrens belonging to the Nahdlatul Ulama. And so you could see that there is the social capital at play being used by religious organizations, groups, and movements. So in conclusion, one of the things I'd like to say is that there is still injustice and social inequalities. And I think with the idea of social capital, one can analyze these holes and gaps in society through the theory of social capital being cultural capital and the resources that permit one to have access to the vaccination or health facilities and what have you. And then there is also this salience, this increasing importance on not the Sharia, but the Maqasid al-Sharia, or the principal objectives of the Sharia. And as we know, the first among the 5 principles or principal objectives of the Sharia is hifzun nafs, meaning the protection of lives, being the first and ultimate principle whereby humanity must abide by. And I think we have seen that many of the religious actors, at least here in Indonesia and in many different parts of the world, that they have played a positive and constructive role in fighting against this COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, and I think the last thing I would just like to say is that there is a need for us to recontextualize our religious teachings and practices. Just recently, last week, I participated in a virtual Friday congregation held by the Public Virtue Institute in Jakarta. And I must say I thoroughly enjoyed it and did not feel that there was any sort of lacking in the ritual after not attending Friday prayers for almost 2 years now. So with that, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah, assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for your attention.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the presentation, Pak Dicky, Sofjan. It's such a great presentation, and I have interested on this topic because I also write my thesis about digital and also the collective piety in Muslim urban society in Surabaya. Well, before we start our question and answer session, I think something I want to share to Pak Dicky. According to what I found in my thesis, I found that there's a community, a small community in Surabaya, already use the collective piety using the digitalization for the religion activities, such as they ask to do the pengajian rutin, but they use the Zoom, they already use the Instagram to promote what they want to share to the Jama'ah, something like that. And this community already happened since around 2017, I think. They already share their knowledge about the Islam by using the technology, digital society, digital tools such as from the Instagram, from the Twitter and the YouTube. But my question is, I think the activity in villages, such as if we want to do the Jama'ah or the pengajian, it's not always in digital connection or something like that. So what do you think? How long will this community survive to be in the digital connection, something like that? Using, using the religious activity. Thank you.
You want me to answer that now?
Yeah. I think it's great to stimulate our participant to ask for the presenter.
Yeah, I appreciate your question. And no, I'm not familiar with the small community that you talked about, but I do believe that this may perhaps jumpstart, the pandemic, the current pandemic may actually jumpstart our engagement with social media religiously. I mean, engaging in rituals and festivities, and even quite possibly pilgrimage. Yeah, I mean, I registered myself for the pilgrimage and about 2 years ago, and I was told that I had to wait for 28 years. So you can just imagine how long that would take me. And, obviously there is a big question mark whether I would ultimately be able to go to Mecca and Medina for my pilgrimage or not. But now I'm thinking, with the pandemic and with all these digital facilities that we have, I've also seen some festivities that are being held, mass rituals and mass festivities being held virtually. Yeah, currently we are in the early parts of the Muharram. Yeah, and as you know, in the Shi'i community, you have the 10-day commemoration of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. And many of these festivities and many of these events are being held actually online using online platforms. Obviously, some do not feel like it is quite similar in terms of the religious experience. And of course, they would opt for physical attendance to many of these festivities. But what I'm trying to say is that I think the time has come for us to start, as I had mentioned in my presentation, to recontextualize our religiosity and the way we practice our religion. Because considering that this pandemic has imposed on us, social distancing and travel restrictions, that I think it is only natural for us as human beings, and I think as Muslims, to want to participate in these religious ceremonies, rituals, and festivities, because I think it's part and parcel of our faith. And so I see that this might become a new trend. I am still waiting for the Majlis Ulama to come up with all kinds of fatwas pertaining to this, especially pertaining to the virtual pilgrimage that I hope to be able to see within my lifetime. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Dicky. I think our participant already gave question. I think there's someone raised the hand. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, I think, okay, Pak Fikri. Okay, I will start with our first question from Pak Fikri.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it loud and clear?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Maybe you can mention your name and your institutions.
Okay. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Fikri Disyacita. I'm from Yogyakarta State University. I would like to ask to Pak Dicky the interesting topic. Pak Dicky, I have a concern too in my previous postgraduate thesis about Shia community in Jember, the acceptance of their existence in the middle of the Sunnis. And I would like to ask that we can see that during the pandemic, the Shia community, especially in Jakarta, Indonesia, and the Yayasan Musta'afin introduced kind of social program such as free vaccination and then free fogging for poor people in the outskirts of Jakarta. And they tried to integrated with the Sunni majority in Jakarta. What I want to ask is the pandemic crisis, pandemic situation will enable the religious minority such as the Shia to make what is that? Mereka bisa membuka peluang untuk toleransi antara the Sunni and the Shia melalui kegiatan-kegiatan sosial dan kegiatan filantropi selama pandemi ini. Bagaimana menurut Pak Sofjan? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fikri. Maybe Pak Sofjan, Pak Dicky, you can directly answer the question.
Yes, thank you very much, Mas Fikri, for your excellent question. And yes, I have been also looking at the Shia community for quite some time now, having lived and studied in Iran previously. I have a book on Sejarah dan Budaya Shia di Asia Tenggara as well, which came out in 2013, published by the Graduate School of Universitas Gadjah Mada. And I've also been involved in some training for Abi and Ijabi individuals, and I also participated in the Tabat festivity for at least 11 days in Bengkulu, in 2016. So I'm fairly familiar with the Shi'i community in Indonesia and know many of the people within that community. And I must say that as a general sentiment, I would say that this pandemic serves as an opportunity for the people of faith to actually come together. And this is what I mean when I say that this pandemic is one proof and evidence that there is not one problem and challenge faced by humanity today which can be resolved by one religion, by one discipline, by one group of people or one country. I think this COVID-19 pandemic attests to this fact that as human beings, we need to come together. And I think there is a message, I think there is a divine message, in fact, behind the unfolding of this COVID-19 pandemic. I sincerely believe that there is a secret, that there is a blessing in disguise amid this tragedy that we are seeing and witnessing for almost 2 years now. But what I'm seeing also is the reverse attitude of some minor groups that are still engaging in the minoritization and the persecution and discrimination of religious minorities. And I think this is my concern. And I think we need to think very closely about this, because one of the features and characteristics of this novel coronavirus is that it is indiscriminate. So this virus does not discriminate between those who believe and those who do not believe, between Muslims and the non-Muslims, between the infidels and the faithfuls. So we have seen good people, pious people, religious people being infected by the virus and killed by the virus. That is a fact. And I don't think any one of us can actually deny this fact that we could see unfolding in many different parts of the world. Obviously, another side to this argument is that we are seeing also an ugly face of religion. We are seeing that some religious people are engaging in religious arrogance, saying that, my wudu or my ablution using water prior to my prayers will protect me from the virus. Or that, anyone who enters the mosque or the church will be safeguarded from the virus, yeah? Or that my blood is soaked in Jesus' blood. You know, we've seen the same kind of conservative sentiments and statements coming out from conservative religious people, both Muslims, non-Muslims alike. And so this is unfortunate. I think these people need to reflect harder in terms of you know, the secrets and the mysteries behind this COVID-19 pandemic, and that they should not be engaging in any form of you know, religious ignorance nor arrogance during this time of pandemic. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pak Dicky, for the answer. Maybe Mas Vicky, there is something you wanna ask again or want to share? If it's enough, I will jump to our second question. Here we have Mbak Khairunisa from Gadjah Mada University, Pak Salut and Pak Dicky. Mbak Nisa is also our presenter in our conference. So please, I will give the time to Mbak Nisa to ask to our presenter.
Thank you so much, Mbak Ajeng. And I have actually a question for Pak Dicky. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Nisa from, I'm actually an alumnus of CRCS from Gadjah Mada University. I think Pak Dicky also know that because I know you before. My question, it's about religious group, actually talking about the government, specifically local governments, sects or organizations. I'm actually curious about how you respond to the fact that everyone to this day that they has their own perspective about this coronavirus, and there are several religions such Lembaga Dakwah Islam Indonesia in the neighborhood where I live actually. In responding this coronavirus, they are so relaxed, so they are enjoying. Sometimes they ignoring the government's policy. Although they adhere to the health protocols like using masks or hand sanitizer, but they still routinely carry out Idul Fitri and Idul Adha celebration, and even they regularly Friday prayers. And sometimes I assume that they act like ignore social distance, such as 1 meter prayers aroused, because I sometimes saw it when they do that, because it's nearly my home actually. I think this is a bad news, and I'm not trying to inform this is how to say, I'm not trying to spread this bad news from one of a religious group actually, but this is the fact what I saw to this day. So how you respond about this religious act? Thank you, Pak Dicky.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Nisa. Maybe Pak Dicky, you can directly answer the question from Mbak Nisa.
Yes, thank you very much, Mbak Nisa, for your great question. And as I mentioned before, that we are seeing numerous responses from religious groups and religious leaders and authorities. And we are, after all, grateful that the religious authorities in Majelis Ulama Indonesia, in Muhammadiyah, and Nahdlatul Ulama are all in agreement with the fact that they agree that that there is this existence of the so-called coronavirus, and that there are negative impacts of this virus and its variants on health, and how damaging it could be to our health, and how it in fact has killed a lot of people along the way. And so we have seen that, but we have also seen, as I mentioned, religious ignorance and religious arrogance. Yeah? In my paper, I mentioned also during the early part of the pandemic in February 2020, if you remember, we had the highly popular Muslim preacher, Ustad Abdul Somad, saying that the novel coronavirus was part of the Tentara Allah, right? So part of the soldiers of God who have come to destroy China, essentially, because of the persecution of the Uyghurs. In fact, he said, and I quoted him in my paper, that he believes that the people of Uyghur will never contract the virus because they are in constant wudu, that they are in a constant state of ablution, meaning that they are pure, innocent, and would not be able to contract the virus. And so this is one of your typical sort of conservative perspective on the COVID-19 pandemic. And we are not just seeing this among the Muslims, we are seeing this also among the Christians, the Catholics, Hindus, Buddhists, and all sorts of religious communities and people of faith. Yeah, and so I don't think we can overgeneralize, but we can at least recognize that there are still people who do not believe in the veracity and the dangers of this novel coronavirus, and that we must respect that. But then we must also be fully cognizant of the fact that we are also being surrounded by negative campaigns, propaganda, and hoax. I think the earlier speaker had talked also about the influence of the various negative developments in social media and the internet. And we have seen a lot of anti-vacciners, as we call them, who have been influenced through social media, through YouTube postings and messages of what's up. And I think we are seeing a number of casualties and death caused by such acts. So I think it would be helpful if religious leaders and the religious authorities, even in Majlis Ulama, to perhaps come up with a fatwa saying that anyone who would be engaging in hoax amid this COVID-19 pandemic would be sent to hell and would be burnt to hell. I think, and I'm being serious about this, because I think it has some theological and religious consequences, especially when it comes to, as I said, Maqasid al-Sharia being that the first and foremost principle of Maqasid al-Sharia is hifzun nafs, which means the protection of lives. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pak Dicky, for the response. Maybe Mbak Nisa, is there anything you want to add or more? Or is it enough?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's enough. Thank you, Mbak Ajeng.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Nisa. Ladies and gentlemen, we still have another question from our participant. I will let our second participant to give the question to our presenter. I will say hello first. Hello, Mas Eko Bagus from UIN Raden Palembang.
Halo, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Okay, let's give the question for the presenter. Sure.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mbak Ajeng, for the opportunity. Here I am interested to the explanation from Mr. Salut Muhidin regarding global digital society. As we know that after demonstration in the street became restricted during this pandemic, many social movement organizations worried regarding civil participation. Fortunately, they are adapted very fast by changing medium of struggle from field action, or like a demonstration on the street, to virtual action. For example, Coalition of Bersihkan Indonesia, that's a social movement network consists of anti-corruption, environment, anti-mining, working class, and human rights movement, conduct virtual sidang rakyat to protest Minerba Bill in 2020. But unlike young Islamic movement, which has successful in their online activities, as Mbak Ajeng asked to presenter, asked to narasumber, we still doubt about the power pressure or about the effectiveness of the pressure of this protest movement. So my question is to Mr. Salut Muhidin regarding the power of pressure or pressure strength, whether those kind of online activism like anti-mining activism or critics to omnibus law movement have the same power of pressure if compared to field demonstration to pressure the government, or this kind of online activism still have less what is it, or still less influence to the government. Thank you, Mbak Ajeng.
Okay, thank you for the question, Mas Eko. Pak Salut?
Okay.
It's okay.
Thank you, Mas Eko. Palembang, yeah. Been a while not going to Palembang. So I used to go to Unsri with the Magister Management there. Thank you, Pak Eko. About the social pressure doing digital. Okay. There are certain conditions in order something could become effective or not. Okay. There are also some examples that social pressure through digital media has been very powerful. If you have heard about the gas emission, like to make zero carbon monoxide or 360 level, okay? So that's really worldwide accepted. And if you remember about the pressure in some other country that they've been locked down from the social media, but there was someone who were able to use Instagram or Twitter and so on, they become widely spread out. Okay. A lot of studies find out that those messages become very strong, powerful, and become supported worldwide because they touch the same issues, very basic one. Okay, like we want to have clean environment. We want to have freedom in this country, like in Egypt last time, yeah, about the movement, and also in Hong Kong, for example, last time if you listen that one. So if you see that one, what is the similarity between those who are being supported locally and widely? If you touch kind of like trying to convince everyone that this is very human value enough, rather than just like, oh, this is more your group movement. This is your group movement, okay? So in Indonesian case, for example, I'm sorry if I wrongly said that if you said about this is about the Muslim or about Islam, and then somebody will question you, are you from NU? Are you from Muhammadiyah? Are you from PKS? Or are you from HTI? They start questioning you. It's rather than looking at what the message, but saying that, oh, who you are first in the first place, okay? So that's kind of like little bit make a lot of pressure or idea that you try to convey being kind of like a little bit not really reaching to the whole audience, okay? But once the message is kind of like trying to convince everyone, this is kind of like more general issues, this is more kind of like humanist issue that everyone should kind of like trying to support this, I think that's more kind of like. So back to my early statement that there are certain conditions that we need to meet criteria whether this is going to be effective or not. Okay, you can Google in Google Scholar about how effective the campaigns through mass media, either popular culture or based on religious studies. One. The second condition is that whether people digital literacy. Okay, what is the level of digital literacy among the society itself? I mean, like. Ajeng already asking about the digital in urban society in Surabaya, for example. Do you think that going to happen exactly the same when we convey the message in the rural area? where digital is not really kind of like their everyday life yet. Okay, so we have to find out that who's your target market or who's your target population is about. So if you can adjust accordingly, just like being sermon, like ceramah, you talk in front of the student going to be different language when you talk like in front of Jumat praying, right? So we have to kind of like use very common language and so on, because we don't know who's our audience. But in the academic forum, we know that we're going to face student, going to face professor, going to be lecture, so they do understand the language, maybe that what they understand. Maybe that's the two things that I say. Thank you, Ajahn.
Okay, thank you, Pak Salut. Maybe Mas Eko, is there something you want to add more to Pak Salut?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the participant who already asked the question to our presenter. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I will inform you once again that our question and answer is really flexible, and you can use Bahasa Indonesia if you want to ask to our presenter, because maybe some of you still afraid to talk to our presenter due to the English language, something like that. Or maybe you can write your question to the chat box. Waiting for another question. I would go to our participant who want to ask again. Hello, Mas Julang.
Hello.
Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, our participant here is from UIN Sunan Ampel, Surabaya. Please, Mas Julang, you can ask to our presenter.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Ajeng. My name is Julang Aryo Wiloto from UIN Sunan Ampel, Surabaya, and my question is for Mr. Dicky Sofjan. Hello, Mr. Dicky. Nice to meet you.
Assalamualaikum.
Okay, Mr. Dicky, from my point of view, I guess religion both helped and hurt during this pandemic. Let's say after second year of this pandemic, somehow religion protected mental health, but by making people less concerned. But somehow religion endangered physical health by less committed to solving the real threats, which is the coronavirus itself. And my question is, in your point of view, how to manage the situation in a religious and democracy country so that religion as social capital, as you said, not only protected mental health, but also maintain physical health without hurting, quote unquote, the believers. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Julang, for the question. Maybe Pak Dicky, you can answer directly.
Yes, I'm not quite sure what you mean by mental hurt. What do you mean by mental hurt? You mean herd mentality?
I mean like being happy, being careless with the pandemic, like physical and mental.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Well, yeah, I think your question is very clear now. So one of the things that we need to realize is that this virus is what we call in Islam as ghaib, yeah? So it's invisible, yeah? And obviously believing in the invisible or the world of the invisible is wajib, yeah? Alladhina yu'minuna bil ghaibi, right? So there is it's part of Islam's article of faith to believe in the world of the unseen. It is exactly like how we believe in the usefulness and the effectiveness of the Wi-Fi system. Yeah, we do not see the frequencies of the Wi-Fi system, but we believe that there is a frequency that is at play that is connecting our computer with your computer and with the larger community of internet users around the world, right? So if there are religious people who still do not believe in the virus or the existence of the virus, then they need to check their belief system. They need to check their own articles of faith, and whether they do not also believe in the Wi-Fi system, for instance, or whether they use the internet. Because I think if they are using the internet, and if they do believe in the Wi-Fi system that we have right now, then this is what's called cognitive dissonance. Yeah. So there is this inconsistency in the way that they are thinking about reality. Yeah. And I think this is what has transpired in a lot of the cases that I've seen, that many religious people are experiencing cognitive dissonance. Yeah. So on the one hand, they have this structured belief on the power of God and the power of their prayers and supplications and incantations and wudu, and you know that Jesus's blood runs through my blood and so on and so forth. Yeah, or the magic of the masjid and the churches and the kelentengs and the chandis and so on and so forth. Yeah, but because there is this widespread COVID-19 pandemic, you know, it is destabilizing the belief system. Yeah, they are now sort of questioning whether their religion, their religiosity, their rituals, their prayers, supplications, incantations are enough to fight against the novel coronavirus. And I think this was some of the questions that I highlighted in the religious response, in the list of the religious response questions that I have noted going sort of around the world. Yeah, and this is not something that is unique to Indonesia, I must say. We are also seeing the same thing with the conservative Christians in the US, for instance, who are totally against vaccinations, yeah, who still do not believe in the virus or think that the novel coronavirus is similar to a regular flu that you have every 3 or 6 months, you know, and that it is not fatal. Yeah. So we do get a number of religious responses from different communities of faith. And I think one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, was that there is hoax and negative campaigns and propaganda at play in the internet and social media and WhatsApp. I've seen a decline in that in recent months. I think governments around the world are also managing the problem together with the various outlets, social media outlets like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I mean, it's almost the same case as in the case of radicalism and extremism in the internet. You know, I was examining that and studying that since the height of the Syrian war. And we saw a lot of negative propaganda and negative campaigning, hoaxes and hate speeches targeted toward the Shia community, saying that Bashar al-Assad is Shia and that he is killing the Sunnis in northern Syria and blah, 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 right? But then after post-2013 and around 2017 and 18, we have seen much less of these hoaxes and hate speeches. I mean, I myself have been invited by Facebook maybe 4 or 5 times in many of the events to discuss about the content policy with the directors of the content policies of Facebook in Jakarta, in Singapore, in Myanmar, in UK, and the US. Yeah, so I think there are measures and there are also countermeasures being done by governments and social media outlets to fight against the the hoaxes and the negative campaignings and so on, which I think all of them also contribute to the cognitive dissonance that I talked about earlier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Dicky, for the answer. Maybe Mas Dulang, is there something you want to add more?
Okay, enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mas Dulang, for the question. Well, Pak Salut and Pak Dicky, I'm really honored to be here as the moderator of this session because I feel like I get lecturing from a great lecturer, Pak Salut and Pak Dicky. I'm so happy because actually this topic is totally my concern also in digital and also in religious activity for the Muslim urban in the urban, something like that. I think I want to, before we go to another question, I think I want to ask for Pak Dicky, continuing what Mas Dulang question. I already write an article in this conference that I saw that the religious leader in the region, I call it as a in Madura Regency, they are not doing their job to share about the awareness of the COVID-19. They are talking about that the Madura society should afraid with the God rather than the COVID-19. So this is something that we need to more concerned about the activity that we need the role of the religious leadership, something like that. And talking to that case, the policy that run in our government, in the central government, is totally like a different. So we have the policy gap in our regency, something like that. So what do you think about this, Pak Dicky?
Yes, great question. And before I answer that question, there is also a question in the chat room by Leah Hilyatul,
okay,
which I can address later on if you want. Yeah.
Okay.
But I like your question, and that reminds me of one of the things that I found in recent years, following the development of the internet and social media and how these platforms have become somewhat omnipresent in our lives. And one of the negative effects of the rise of the internet and social media is what's called the fragmentation of religious authorities, meaning to say that there is an increasing polarization of views on religion by people who are either in the role of authorities or people who think that they have religious authorities, right? In my previous work, I did research on religion and television, where I analyzed the role of celebrity ustads and ustazahs on television, namely, Yusuf Mansur and Mamah Dede and all. Yeah. Now, of course, we see them quite differently from the ones we see in social media. But even since then, we have seen a growing ascendance of the so-called fragmentation of religious authorities, meaning to say that, people tend to want to associate themselves with religious authorities that are younger, that are handsome or pretty, or who can really speak well, meaning that they are articulate, and that they can really speak the language of the people. Yeah. And so this is what we tend to find, that there's a lot of celebrity ustads and ustazahs as well in the internet and the social media who are very, very influential. If you look at the research recently done by PPIM UIN Syarif Hidayatullah in Jakarta, I was involved in sort of as a consultant to the research design. They looked into big data analytics and looked into millions of data sets from YouTube and Twitter, and saw the fragmentation of religious authority quite clearly. in the results of their research. Yeah? So we've seen people like Hasan Haikal, who has never been seen previously as an ahli agama or ustad or somebody who is well versed in Quranic tafsir, for instance, but we are seeing him being more popular than, let's say, Professor Dr. Quraish Shihab, yeah, or Nazaruddin Umar, yeah, who are clearly people of knowledge, who are clearly well versed in the Quran and quite possibly have mastered the Quranic sciences and have written many books of tafsirs and books on Islam, yeah? But yet their influence in the social media is lacking or is much less compared to the more famous and more celebrity-like figures who are pretending to be religious experts and ustads and ustazas. And so I'm seeing this fragmentation of religious authority having a very negative impact on the ummah, on how the Muslims are not following the right kind of teachings and learnings coming from the rightful authorities. And having said that, it's fairly easy to find sources, Islamic classical sources on pandemics. There've been a lot of circulation about this prophetic hadith, which is at least sahih, right? In which the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that, if you are in a city that is experiencing a pandemic, then you should not get out of the city. And if you are traveling and entering a city with a pandemic, then you should avoid going into that city. I think that is pretty clear. And if any of you have seen the movie by Majid Majidi, entitled Muhammad, where it depicts the story of the Prophet Muhammad when he was young, he himself experienced a pandemic in Mecca. And that was one of the reasons why he was then taken away from Mecca right before the pandemic to be saved from the pandemic and being separated from his beloved mother. And so from all of these teachings, I think it's quite clear what the Islamic classical sciences and the principal teachings of Islam says about pandemics and viruses and bacteria and how one should avoid hurting oneself when engaging in any acts in life. And so I'm seeing the phenomenon in Madura as being sort of partially caused by the fragmentation of religious authorities. And hence that is one of the reasons why many of the people there are not listening to the more authoritative religious figures, both in Surabaya, in East Java, or in Jakarta. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pak Dicky, for the answer. So I think Pak Dicky already answered the question from Mbak Lia. Okay, I think we still have another question from our committee. Mbak Rida, please.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Great. Okay, I have like two questions for Pak Salut and one comment or it's a question. First for Pak Salut. I'm so sorry. First of Pak Salut, you were talking about digital society. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I dare to assume that to establish digital society, then we should lay, digital literacy as foundation first, right? And then within the context of like in global or locally in Indonesia, for example, how important is the digital literacy during this pandemic era. I mean, if you you say also about in your data about digital competitiveness, thanks to you, I know the difference that why if you use application like WhatsApp, it is different use versus knowledge than you say earlier. If you use WhatsApp, it's not necessarily you are being knowledgeable about digital literacy only because you use WhatsApp and other applications, right? So this is why we have those viral TikToks and whatever. To the people say that they because they said they want to have the entertainment channels to boost their immunes, and I guess it's quite interesting. They said that reason. So what is the context of digital literacy and in the digital society that you mentioned? Because that's the first question. The second question is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the quite similar concept of digital society, can I assume that this is like the global village that we've been known that we've been known about like 2 decades ago, that heavily relates to society and the use of technology and internet have been known for these 2 or 3 decades. What do you think the changes, if it is any changes, before and during the pandemic? I mean, the development of digital society, because we've known internet and the use of social media itself in the normal era, and then we have now is the new normal era. What is the difference? If it is any different, if it is similar, then why it is similar? Because we've seen like the engagement of people, like we've been in lockdown conditions, so we use more to digital media than the offline media. That's my question for Pak Salut. And then I'd like to ask a question to Pak Dicky. Maybe you have answered this, but it is okay. Well, probably I haven't really catch the idea. Like you said that about social capital and then religious leaders. I see. I want to highlight about the, what do you call that? The siding, pemihakan, the siding of religious leaders to the government side. I mean, the government often invite or encourage religious leaders to, to promote jaga jarak, dan segala macam. Jadi pemerintah menggunakan religious leader untuk juga mempromosikan 5M. But and often they use the term of maslahah. Maslahah itu for ini kepentingan umat, kemaslahan umat, kepentingan kita bersama sehingga harus dijalankan. But the question is, I've also seen like the civil society has likely lost their trust to the government. So is it really effective to use a religious leader to promote the way the government handling the pandemic? Because I know that the government use religious leader because they have quite influence and social capital, but the problem is now we can see that people are likely lost their trust to the government. Do you have any views on that, Pak Dicky? Thank you for the answer. Thank you, Mbak Ajeng.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Rida, for the question. I think I will go first to Pak Salut to answer the question from Mbak Rida.
Okay. Thank you, Mbak Ajeng and also Mbak Rida. very hard, and also need to think about the answer, of course. Yes, first of all, yes, I do agree about the digital literacy. If we do understand, literacy doesn't mean just in terms of reading, yeah, for example, literacy doesn't mean that people can just read. Okay, literary much more deeper on that one. Literary means like you do understand what you're reading, you do understand what the meaning behind it, and you do kind of like completely, fully, like comprehensive is basically. Okay, so that's why I do agree with you that having connected with WhatsApp doesn't mean that you're already digitally digital literacy in some way, but not necessarily that you do understand or you kind of like completely. That's why, for example, the issues about hoax, very kind of like quite bigger issues these days. And then if you follow the news, it's always almost every day there is kind of like some misleading interpretation, including what Pak Dicky said about. I remember when my father-in-law still alive during the election. Actually, he told me that he has to choose one candidate because being told that if you choose one or the other is basically like against your religious will. I said, who's told you? This is the WhatsApp that I received from my community. I said, like, no, that's nothing to do with that one. Okay, so you've been connected to something, but then you do have to understand behind that one. Okay, same thing with digital literacy. So of course, there is a stage 1, 2, 3, and 4 in order to become like we call it as fully digital literacy. You cannot just simply have been connected. That's why we can see, like if you recall my presentation, when the global competitive digital competitiveness index being built, they use a lot of variable, including about the human resources itself, knowledge, about the infrastructure, and also about that one. It doesn't mean that being just kind of like the highest one, meaning your digital literacy and so on. So to answer your question, how important this one is, very important, in particular for everyone. As the COVID-19 impact this one, I told you that there are a lot of studies being conducted to see there is a lot of the impact to the society, including with the changing behavior. Okay, among the young one, the millennial, they get used to, even when they just like little one, they already have the gadget with them. That's completely different with our generation, with my generation, with our parent generation. I know that some of the older generations still kind of reluctant want to use that one. But because of the pandemic, I remember one of my neighbor who not used to kind of like that one, he now become like addicted, want to use that one. Again, it's just a matter because he want to be connected with the family, especially during lockdown. Is feeling lonely is really one of the biggest issues. So that's why it's being connected even through just Zoom, say Selamat Hari Raya or Happy Birthday and so on, it's really making them feeling like, oh, I'm being connected again. So it's really hard for us who is as a social human being being not connected. Okay, that's why even they just kind of like if you join with a Zoom where there are kind of like different generation, you can see that who's pushing the button all the time. That will be the senior citizen making noise. Like, oh, so but they try. Okay, some people keen to learn something. Some others kind of just like, I don't want to touch. The same thing when the typewriter, when there was no computer. Some people doesn't want to touch computer because they said, no, this is not my generation. But I think when you ask about whether there is different or not different before and after pandemic is kind of like making you or push you to basically cannot avoid. And even from the management perspective, from the business point of view, there are more likely all the business going to sweep from the face-to-face platform into the online platform. That's why there are a lot of the bank, they close the branches, but they do it online because you can just use the tab everywhere. The online shopping is much more efficient. So that's kind of like basically push everyone shifting from regular into that one. Okay, so that's kind of like the big one. The second one is, I forgot, Barida, something to do with
before pandemic and during pandemic, about the digital society itself, because digital society
yeah,
unlikely relates to the use of internet, and what are the changes then?
Yes, okay. I think I little bit highlight in that one. So basically, before that one, we have like the choice whether we want to use it or not. But then after pandemic, looks like we have little choice. We still have choice, but the question is that whether we want to catch up with everyone else or not. Okay, so it's more kind of like the pressure to choose that you have to do it in somehow, especially the business people. And as I said, education is also starting to do that one. Now, almost every education already offering online. Even Muhammadiyah having online, having recently the Corps HMI also putting the new university online. So whether Sunan Ampel also want to do online class, I'm not so sure yet, but looks like the trend to be online, that's going to be there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Salut, for the answer. I will go to Pak Dicky.
Yes, thank you very much, Mbak Rida, for the question, and I'll try to link it up with Mbak Lia's answer or question on the solidaritas semu. Yeah. So one of the things I think we need all to realize is that this is an emergency. In the religious language, this is what's called darurat, darura, meaning to say that anything goes as long as we first and foremost fulfill the requirements of the maqasid al-sharia, which is the hifzun nafs, which is the saving of lives. And as you know, in Islamic fiqh, that one thing that may be halal or one thing that may be haram, forbidden, could be transformed into halal when it comes to darura, when it comes in contact with emergency situations. Yeah. So I think everybody needs to understand that we are in a state of emergency, meaning to say that anything that we do must first and foremost be directed toward the protection of lives or the saving of lives. And I think most people, most rational and reasonable minded people will agree about this. Yeah. Now, what's interesting is that there are some people of faith, religious people, who might disagree and think that this is like an instrumentalization of religion, yeah, where the government is using religious authorities and using religious leaders to mobilize people, yeah, to get them to be vaccinated, to get them to wear masks, to get them to do social distancing and tracking and testing and so on and so forth, yeah. But you see, from the religious perspective, that is fine, as long as the intention is to save lives. Because saving lives, as we know in the Quranic injunction, it's very clear that if you save one life, it's like saving the whole of humanity. And if you kill one life, then it's like killing the whole of humanity. And so Islam in that sense, or the Quran in that sense, is very pro-life. This is a very different kind of theology that we find from the suicide bombers, from the radicalists and the extremists who find that lives are very cheap, yeah? That God tends to want us to die, that God prefers us to die for the religion as opposed to live for the religion and to help the religion and to help the ummah and to help humanity to progress and develop and so on and so forth. Yeah. So in my mind, it's fine if the government instrumentalizes religion and the religious leaders, as long as it is to save lives. So I think that is the first and foremost principle that we need to be wary of. I do understand your argument behind your question, though, that we are seeing a trend where the government tends to use religion and religious figures to support their policies. And some policies are obviously not for the betterment of society and not for the interest of humanity or the citizenry, but rather to fill the pockets of some public officials and in cahoots with the conglomerates and the business and traders and merchants and so on and so forth. So I understand perfectly the underlying assumptions of your questions, but when it comes to striving or this COVID-19 pandemic, I think anything goes as long as it is to save lives. So that is one thing. So the other concerns, I think, very much related to Mbak Leah's question about this solidaritas semu. And hence we are seeing that some people are following the government orders and the advice from the religious leaders simply because they want to be seen as being a good citizen, and not being a bad citizen. And that to me is also fine. And I think that also gives credence to our democracy, because democracy provides and facilitates for rationality and for reason to take precedence over all other things. So, but I also understand that there are people of faith who seem to believe in some form of conspiracy, that there is this globalist agenda to dominate the world. Now, I'm trained in political science, and political science deals with a lot of conspiracy theories, so to speak. I mean, even the idea of government is conspiratorial in nature, because you never know what government officials are really talking about, right? When they are discussing about how to spend money or state expenditure and so on and so forth. So by definition, all governments are conspiratorial in that sense, But what I need to say is what's unfortunate, and I think this is largely caused by naivety, that I must state that some people of faith are too naive to think that this COVID-19 was produced by China, and that China is trying to dominate the world through the spreading of this COVID-19 pandemic. What's interesting is that a lot of these people of faith, especially among the Muslims here in Indonesia, do not seem to believe that there is anything to do with the United States or America, while we know that America has had a lot of laboratories, both within its own territories and also in the Middle East and Europe and so on, that are engaging in biological weaponry system research. So we need to be really careful in terms of how we look at this problem. I think what Mbak Leah is talking about perhaps is this emphasis on mechanical solidarity, as Emil Durkheim would call it, and instead of the organic solidarity that we wish to uphold and spread around in our country. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pak Dicky, for the answer. I think we have a last question from our participant. I will let our Master Ceremony, Mas Nurul Hidayatullah, to ask the question.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
I have a question for Dr. Salut Muhidin. The question is, in your presentation, you compared about previous pandemics, for example, Spanish flu, in the era before the world was interconnected digitally, such as now. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think previous pandemics did not spread as much as today because they were less interconnected. So my question is there any lessons that we can learn from the way previous societies overcome the pandemic in their time that we can implement today when today we are interconnected digitally?
Okay, thank you, Mas Lutfi, for the question. We'll let Pak Salut to answer it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mas Lutfi. Very nice question and also very important one. There, of course, we call it as selalu ada hikmah, yeah. Behind one event, there is always a story and lesson behind. What kind of like lesson from the past that we can learn to overcome this one is basically, if you look at the studies, what always they comparing between the past pandemic case comparing with today is a lot of people from medical point of view look at that one. Okay, they look about the spread, they look at how to solve it. So that's why the advice to use the mask, the advice to kind of like keep distance, that's kind of like being learning from what happened in the past as well. Okay, that's why if you looking at the pictures, there was always kind of like similarity, like having mask and so on. So what the thing that didn't happen in that one is basically the information sharing. Okay, if at the time, information sharing may be only cluster within the society who being connected with the sources, like medical doctor, maybe the journalists, and then until they put in the newspaper. So today is basically, if you knew about situation that one, you can also kind of like react accordingly. Nevertheless, as we know that because of everybody can write anything, because of everybody can sharing anything, sometimes without any screening, we sometimes often confuse which one correct or not, which one is incorrect one, right? Because like vaccination, for example, like Pak Dicky, Sofjan said about there are movements to say against of vaccination because they got wrong message, or could be somebody who believe this kind of like happening due to like magnets coming here, or that's why we received the WhatsApp video saying like, hey, look, when you put the magnets, it's happening in this one. So a lot of like the senior citizen looking at that one can like take it for granted without kind of like questioning anything else. Okay, so that could be the lesson learned, that the information become much spread easily because we are now being connected one. But the challenge at the same time is how do we make sure that the information being spread exactly what kind of like real happening. Okay, even among the medical, some groups kind of like against vaccination because they said, oh, this is not natural. Some others kind of like say like it has to be vaccinated because that's the only way. Okay, so that could be the lesson learned, is about spreading information much faster, and then including to how to contain and also to give message. Okay, but nevertheless, its majority still kind of like the good message about that one. That's why if you can see the global curve is always kind of like eradicate almost kind of like everywhere. Maybe that's one.
Okay, thank you, Pak Salut, for the answer. Maybe Mas Lutfi, do you want to add more?
I think it's clear enough. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you everybody, and all the participants are still joining this session. I'm so happy that we finally, in our injury time, around after this, we will end the session. But before we end the session, I have a final question for our speaker. Because we are talking in academic stage, I think I need to know about your thoughts about the research agenda. Maybe you have what is your research agenda about this topic, because it can be the suggestion for us as a scholar to develop this topic. Maybe I can start from Pak Dicky.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, for one, there needs to be much more research looking at the notions of social capital, social resilience, and the ability of societies to cope with stress, to cope with pressures, and to cope with pandemics. Yeah, I mean, you can look at it from the historical point of view, you can look at it from the religious point of view, or sociological point of view, or political point of view. Yeah? I think that really depends on your disciplinary backgrounds. Yeah? The other concerns the more sort of theological basis of the religious response to this COVID-19 pandemic. I think I mentioned earlier in my presentation that I'm writing and trying to analyze the various fatwas that were produced during this pandemic and how that have affected the Muslims in terms of molding their confidence in the government policies in the mitigation measures against the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think there's a huge sort of room for research along the lines of how religious leaders and religious authorities come up with rationalizations and come up with religious argumentations and justifications for the vaccination, for the masking, for the social distancing, and for the restrictions on going on Hajj, on visiting places of worship, houses of worships, and attending rituals, mass rituals and festivities, and so on and so forth. So there's a huge sort of gap of knowledge in terms of how different communities, not just Islam, but also other religious communities cope or have coping strategies in the fight against the pandemic. The third level of research agenda, which you might perhaps be interested in considering, is the interreligious aspect of how the people of faith intertwine the interest and agenda in fighting for this common cause. As I mentioned, that when you think about the pandemic, you cannot think in terms of what Pierre Bourdieu calls, the inward-looking, or Robert Putnam calls this inward-looking, exclusive forms of solidarity. Yeah, but rather because this novel coronavirus is indiscriminate, we know that by fact, which means that we need to collaborate, we need to cooperate with different peoples of faith and even people without faith. Yeah, because again, if you return back to the first and foremost principle of the Maqasid Sharia, again, it's the protection of lives. And according to the Quranic injunction, as I mentioned, that saving one life is like saving the whole of humanity, and killing one life is like killing the whole of humanity.
Well, thank you, Pak Dicky, for answering my question. I will go to Pak Salut.
Okay, thank you, Gadjah. For the next research is basically I would like to see there is a connection, digital adaptation with the impact to the equality and poverty in Indonesia. Okay, because we know that even without pandemics, our society in terms of poverty level is already kind of like very big one. If we measure by food intake, if we measure by money they spend. So what happened with that digital adaptation because of this pandemic situation, where I said everyone cannot avoid, So let's see whether the index gaps poverty is also going to be much lower. I know that some students, like I give lecture, guest lecture in S.2 Magister in Kependudukan in UI. There also some students interested want to do that one. So I think studies goes kind of like that direction will be very useful and also very interesting to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Salut, and also Pak Dicky. So, ladies and gentlemen, we can develop our research more about the social capital and then also about the interreligious effect due to the pandemic. It comes from Pak Dicky's idea, and maybe if there is someone of you are interested on digital, we can develop our research agenda due to the digital adaptation, inequality, and also the poverty during the pandemic era in our society and this pandemic era also. Well, I'm so happy and glad that we are finally in our end of meeting. Before I end up the session, maybe there's something that you want to say for the last speech for Pak Dicky and also Pak Salut to our committee and to all the participants here.
Can I start, Pak Dicky?
Yeah,
okay.
maybe.
Well, first of all, yeah, once again, thank you very much to the committee and anyone here. I know there are professor, there are senior lecturer, there is also a lecturer and also student who's this one. I'm open with the collaboration or any that kind of like we're doing research together. That's pretty good. And I wish everyone all the best. And because this is the first international conference, so I wish you have the future more sustainable, second, the third, and so on. So I think that's, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Salut. I will, Pak. Okay, thank you, Pak Dicky.
Yes, likewise, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me and for extending this very kind invitation for me to share my insights and experiences in research on this topic. You know, I've attended a lot of international webinars and national webinars, but I think this is one of the most how should I say, active and flourishing discussion that we've had over the course of almost 3 hours now. You know, I've been to Sunan Ampel a few times, and I've met your rector maybe 3 years ago. I've done some training for your faculty members. And we also have a number of graduates, PhD graduates from ICRS who are teaching in Sunan Ampel. And so I would be very glad if any of the lecturers here who have yet to get their PhD to do it in ICRS. Yeah? Although I must warn you that they say that to enter ICRS is very difficult. But to get out of ICRS is even more difficult. Ya? Jadi masuknya susah, keluarnya lebih susah lagi. So that's one of the reasons why people are oftentimes intimidated. But we are an international program, an interdisciplinary program, an interreligious program. We have at least around 54 PhD graduates from our program after 15 years. And our student body comes from about 15 to 16 different countries of the world. We have regular students from the US, from Korea, from India, from the Philippines, Myanmar, Singapore, Colombia, Thailand just last year, and so on and so forth. So we would be very happy to receive any of your PhD applications to ICRS. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Dicky, for the statement. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the participation and your presence until now. I also would like to say thank you for the committee for having me here as a moderator. And I wish the very successful for this conference for the future of the SAICoPSS. And I also wish that we can do the collaboration between Pak Salut and maybe Pak Dicky, and we can add more of the scholar that come to our conference in the future. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I would say sorry if there are so many mistakes that I made in this session. Maybe I can give it back to our Master of Ceremony, Mas Lutfi Nurhidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you very much, Mbak Ajeng. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the after the question and answer session, that was the end of our session today. Thank you very much to both of our speakers, Dr. Salut Muhidin from Macquarie University, Australia, and also Mr. Dicky Sofjan, Ph.D. from Universitas Gadjah Mada, Yogyakarta, Indonesia. And to our moderator, Mbak Ajeng from UINSA, let's give them a round of applause. Before we close this event, I would like to we would like to present certificates of appreciation to both of our speakers today, as well as the moderator. Let's wait for the certificate. Okay, on behalf of FISIP UIN Sunan Ampel Surabaya, we would like to present the certificate to Dr. Salut Muhidin as our speaker today.
Thank you,
Salut, please accept this certificate.
Yeah.
And the next certificate is dedicated for Dr. Dicky Sofjan as the speaker of today's event. Mr. Dicky, please accept the certificate.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And finally, to our moderator, Ms. Ajeng Widya Prakasita, please accept this certificate as well.
Thank you.
Next, we would like to invite Dr. Abid Rahman, the lecturer of UIN Sunan Ampel, Surabaya, to lead the prayer before we close today's session. Dr. Abid? Yeah, Dr. Abid Rahman.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Lutfi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay. Let's pray to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala in the hope this agenda will be useful for us and for our country. By reciting Al-Fatihah, A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillah. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin, hamdan na'imin, hamdan syakirin, hamdan yuafi ni'amahu wa yukafi mazidah. Ya Rabbana wa lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhikal karim wa 'azimi sultanik. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali sayyidina Muhammad. Allahumma anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa 'allimna ma yanfa'una warzuqna uluman tanfa'una bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Allahumma ij'al jam'ana hadha jam'an mubarakan marhuma wa tafarruqana min ba'dihi tafarruqan ma'suma. Wala taj'alna fihi wala ma'anna syaqiyya wala mahruma. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzabannar. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
And finally, we end this session by singing Bagimu Negeri as one of the national songs of Indonesia.
Jatuh
And last but not least, everybody, let's take a picture together. Please turn on your video and give your best expression to commemorate today's event. Everyone, please turn on your camera. Okay. Give your best smile. Once again. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And I would like to give the floor, the screen back to our Chief Committee if you have any other announcement.
Thank you, Pak Nurlutfi Hidayatullah, sebagai MC. Thank you, Mbak Ajeng. Thank you, Pak Salut. Thank you, Pak Dicky. We are very honored having you to this conference. Hope we have another series of conference so that we can invite you again. Thank you, thank you. Stay safe and healthy, Bapak.
Thanks Pak Salut.
Matur suwun ya Pak Jaki.
Terima
kasih
Terima kasih Pak Salut, Pak Dicky.
Pak Dicky, sampai ketemu lagi next time.
Salam ke Mbak